Oh, the wonder of a rose. They come in such beautiful colours, different shapes of course, but what artist doesn't want to draw and paint a rose? So this will show you how to paint a rose after doing a pen and ink drawing. The rose I did was based on this yellow rose here, and this is the final painting. Just slightly different in colour. And notice one thing about painting a rose as opposed to photograph. This is obviously a pink rose and you don't see any white in it. And the yellow rose, yes, there is some white area showing through. And this is a white rose, which isn't all white. It has some grey colour and even some yellow colour in it. So, starting off with a pen and ink drawing, is it important to note that a pen and ink drawing only puts the dots, this is a stippling effect, in for the shadows and not the colour. And so it's important to see all these areas in here have a lot of dots, and you can see looking at it, there's black areas, there's grey areas, and of course the white. So you're only putting in the dots where the shadows are, and obviously this area is left white. So when it comes to doing a painting, in this one back here, I've actually got some white areas in here. Okay, and that is important because the beauty of the rose is all these petals just sort of have a curl to them, especially when the rose is opening up a bit tighter in here, but even then, even these petals have a curl to them. Now here's a sample of a pink one that I've used as a demo purpose, so that's why I've got different shades again. But even here, not quite right. This can be an orangey pinkish kind of rose, but this one here, how I've left the white area and it's faded in pink. Now starting off, you can see after the pen and ink drawing that I like to use what they call the grisaille technique, and underpainting. This is where I don't paint the whole rose in one colour, it's sort of a monochromatic painting using the grisaille technique, but I use it for the shadows. So where I've got my pen and ink, I go over it, and in this case I'm using raw umber. I like to use raw umber because it's kind of a warmer colour. However, there are some cases where it's better to use Payne's grey. And going back to the picture of the white rose, you can see that there's a lot of greyish shadows here in this one. So that's where the Payne's grey work. And then having got the drawing here, you can, and this is supposedly a white rose, you can see it, which is where I've used the Payne's grey on everything. And that's the trick. You don't just use Payne's grey on one part of your painting and then change to raw umber another. So this is where the Payne's grey comes in useful. So that should be used for white rose, or even a more bluey, I guess a deep burgundy rose. The Payne's grey would work better than the raw umber. So I will continue on with a painting of this to show actually how to do a leaf. One of the problems with doing a red rose, and this one is more pinky fortunately, is that the color red is very hard to get as red. It needs lots and lots of layers, deeper and deeper, to build it up to a red color. But we'll go over that and continue on next. So here's the actual painting of the rose, and I only need one color on my palette, and that is the crimson red. I use the quinacridone magenta color. Generally you should start from the top and work down so you don't get messed up, and of course I'm not doing that because I've been doing different demos on this, so this is a case of do as I say and not as I do. And you know, you can keep working away, but it's always advisable never to do two petals adjacent to one another. So if I did this, I'll show how to do this one, leave that one and go on to another one maybe down here, and just gradually work your way down. So I'm going to show how to do this one at the top, and then I'll concentrate on one further down. So the thing you need to do first is make sure the petal you are working on is wet. You don't want to get any sharp edges, and if you're careful and just put the water in the space you want, the colour should just stay in there. If you're nervous about that, then by all means put Frisket on this area, because this area you want to keep light, whereas here is going to be dark. So say if you're nervous, then put some Frisket or masking fluid along there. So once I've got that wet, I'm just going to take a number, I'm going to try number 4. No, maybe I'll do a number 2 for this area, as it's you know, quite small. Find a brush here, that's so many. Okay, and with my crimson red, away we go. And as I mentioned previously, red is a very hard colour. Now this is going to be a pink rose anyway, and if you were doing a red rose, you'd probably want to add more of a scarlet colour to it as well, to make it red rather than pink, and it will need a lot of layers. Now, I want to leave some white. I keep preaching that. So good to have a Kleenex handy. And soften the edge there. And if the edge is too sharp, you get your wet brush, dry, and just use it for that. Don't start using that to paint, and just use that brush for putting clean water on. So I want to darken some of these areas. I'm not too concerned about that. It can probably be a little bit darker in here. And in here. And my paper's already drying, so this is where I use my clean water. I don't want it too wet, so lock your brush and just let it blend in. And it's curling, so to get the effect of the curl, and there's a little bit of a dimple in there, and you can just bring that colour around here. And to get it a deeper pink, like I got further over here, you're just going to have to keep going back while it's still damp and just adding more colour to it. Right, so that's the top one, doing a very pinkish. Now we're going to move down here to one that has a nice big curl on it, this one down here. Okay, so same technique. Using my clean water, I'm just going to wet the whole petal. Sorry, I called this a leaf earlier on. It's a petal. And this one will be much darker than the top one because it's underneath. And so this is going to take several layers to deepen it up. So start one layer at a time. And this is where you want to try and keep the white area. So basically I'm covering up my raw umber with the pink. Right over here. And if it's starting to dry, just take your clear water brush and just blend it in. You don't want any sharp edges. It's the beauty of a rose. Some of them, we even have a velvety look to them. And the edges are always darker. Now it's starting to dry on me, so just soften the edge. That's why it's important to have your two brushes. And you can see I'm holding both in my hand here. Clean one that I'm doing the wetting with, and that's why it's always handy to have 2 pots of water as well. One that's just your clear water for doing this, and the other one is obviously for cleaning your brush when you're changing colour or you need to add more water. You can see already it's starting to darken up now. And the other thing too is with watercolour is it always dries lighter, so you may find that once you've done it, it's still really light. And just work away at it. Just bringing that colour in, but ending up with a little bit of white at the top there, and that makes it look as though it's curled around. And the nice thing about white too is that it's not just the fact that it helps to make it look round, it adds some highlight to the painting and brightens up the picture altogether. Okay, so I won't bore you by continually doing this, but I know that once this dries I'm going to need to probably go back over again to make it pinkier. And I'll stop there, but I can see I need to soften some of these edges again. And I know you need to keep going back and just darkening this area under here. Now if you compare with the other petals I've done previously, you'll see that this one is very pinky, and the one above it is more obviously orangey, and the one above that is a different shade again. So you need to sort of play around with your colours ahead of time and see what you've got, because looking at this one it's going to be really pink along with this one over here, but up here is a little more scarlety. So okay, check the colour of your picture or what you want to do. I mean, as you can see, I've started out this with a yellow rose and I'm making it pink. Okay, so that's the basic technique, and similar for the leaves.